as I walk this wicked world, searching for light in the darkness of insanity. Oh yeah, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain and hatred and misery? And each time I feel like this inside, one thing I want to know, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? And as I walk on through troubled times, my spirit gets so downhearted sometimes. So where are the strong, and who are the trusted, and where is the harmony, sweet harmony? 'Cause each time I feel it slipping away, just makes me wanna cry. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Hi there, thank you for joining me. I've got my reading glasses on here, so I'm probably going to be reading some questions that you've sent in. I did a little bit of singing last night. Obviously, we were hoping to be linking up live on Conducive TV for Artists for NHS. You can look on social media to find out how you might contribute. Pretty much anything you do that adds to the solution rather than adds to the problem is the right thing to do. As you know, you don't need me to tell you that. I'm sitting here at home in the second week of what I was advised to take as 14 days of self-isolation here in Vancouver after we had to cut our tour short. Those of you that came to see us know that we had a lot of fun, and we were really glad to see everybody at the shows from Liverpool right through to the Hammersmith Apollo. And I thank you for coming out, even when you might have had second thoughts. And I look forward to seeing the rest of you who thought better of it. Obviously, we waited for somebody to tell us it was time to stop. But the morning after Hammersmith, I really thought, in the absence of any coherent direction, we should take the decision for the safety of my crew, my band, all the drivers, all the people who support us, and not to ask you to come out and hear us play a few old tunes. There's my very, very favorite musical revolutionary, Louis Armstrong, behind us, keeping us safe. So I thought we'd move on, and look, I've got these here questions that you've been kind enough to send in, and I'll see how many of these we can get through in a little while. So Peter Squires, he wrote to say that John Peel, the great BBC DJ, used to talk about his record collection in terms of weight. Well, you know, anybody that founded the Dandelion label really would have always been speaking in terms of heaviosity. You know, heaviosity was a big thing in a lot of the things that he put out. His label did issue one of the greatest records ever made in Liverpool, My Heart Bleeds. You should check out his song, Almost Liverpool 8. Peter asked me, given my sort of infamy for having broad taste, whether my record collection, CD collection, or whatever it is out of control. Well, that really depends on who you ask. Certainly in my day, I've owned a lot of records. They're somewhat scattered around. Some of them are in boxes that I've left in a lockup. So if you know the combination to the padlock, maybe you tell me, because I'd like to get them out now. Some of the CDs, you know, which are now pretty much seen as obsolete, I've passed on to other people. But I like everybody, I have a lot of records to hand, whatever way, a lot of music to hand anyway. CDs, a lot of vinyl records. I went on a jag of buying 78s a few years ago, and they really take you a step closer to the playing of people, because of course the way those were created, particularly in the acoustic era, really puts you in the room with those musicians. So whether you get your music from a disc of some kind, or on a computer, or like all the old musical fish thrown into the stream, any way you discover it's a good way. I don't feel burdened by the weight of the music. I feel lifted up by it. So there is no definitive answer to your question, Peter, but I thank you for asking. Now, Rob Acosta, he's got like enough questions to keep us here till next week. What have you changed or picked up in your life during these times that you intend on continuing after this is over? Well, I think for myself, I have been thinking in major keys. I'm very, very given to thinking in minor keys and the melancholy, drifting into the darkness, and trying to make songs out of that. And that's what I've done most of my way. I've always felt that it was my job to try and write the contrary song, maybe. Right now, as I'm having to spend this time alone, like so many of us, and fortunately, as you see, I'm doing just fine. I just long for the day that I will be able to go over and be with my family, who are staying some ways away here. They're safe over a ferry ride away, living on Vancouver Island. So I needless to say, I cannot wait to be back with them. That's an experience that so many people have, and I'm fortunate in a way that I was able to keep myself safe and sane in my own house. I mean, I'm thinking about my brother Ronan and his wife Christine, who's an NHS nurse, and they are, you know, she's an NHS matron. So she's in a house with 3 kids. I mean, you know, you've all of us got different ways to deal with this. The thing you pick up and put down, I think, is the really checking in on your friends is really the thing that I've been grateful for. The little calls I've had, some of them from people I haven't heard from ages. Are you doing all right? I heard you had to cancel your tour. Where are you? Are you stranded? The job I do has a lot of privileges in it, but it also, for me as the band leader, has a few responsibilities as well, like anybody running some kind of business. So you have to know what you may ask of people who work with you, and you have to check in with them to see if they're doing okay. I'm sure you're well aware that some people are not as good at being alone. I was brought up an only child, so I'm kind of comfortable in my own company. Another person that is very dear to me said to me, I'm really comfortable with my own company because I wasn't an only child. So there you go, you got away from your brothers and sisters who used to drive you crazy, whatever it is. Anyway, let's move on with Rob's questions. You know, what music have you been listening to get you through? Well, I haven't honestly been putting it on as a prescription for the blues, or for fear, or for any of those things. What I do heartily recommend is, I went back to the news gathering, as you would call it nowadays, of my boyhood. When I was a little boy, my mum and I used to listen to the home service, and we would probably hear the news headlines at 8 o'clock, and then I'd go to school, and guess what? The world could have been ending, and I wouldn't have known about it until the 6 o'clock BBC television news. That's not the worst thing in the world. If you leave it tuned in all the time, listen to every statistic, listen to every crackpot theory, every politician saying something that might make sense or might be a total contradiction, might be well-timed or might it be too late, it's easy to go mad. I've listened to everything from The Clash to Beethoven, which would be just like a normal day around here, you know, and every so often I pick up the guitar, work on the songs I'm writing, go over to the piano. It's a really good time if you even have the slightest inkling you have a story to tell or a song to sing. Take this moment when you've got a little bit of time, if you're working from home, when you go on your tea break, if you're working from home on a computer, maybe write down a few thoughts that come to you. Who knows, maybe that's a poem. Maybe that's the beginning of a short story that you'll tell to your kids at bedtime. I don't know. If I knew how to write songs, you know, at will, I would be doing it all day long. I mean, I wouldn't probably be speaking to you right now. Heaven knows I'd be in a rocket ship somewhere. But I'm not. I'm a working guy, and we all are in our different ways. I have my gifts, and I have, as I said, acknowledged some of the privileges we have. So the music that you find the most transporting, I think, is really good. In most times of crisis, escapist films became successful during the Depression, hopeful films during wartime. This will pass, and we'll probably all be singing again very soon. Steve Naive has been doing an incredible thing on Facebook. Now, Steve, as you all know, anybody that knows our band, from the Attractions to the Imposters and his own solo records, going right back to like 1979 to the recent records he's made, is an incredible improviser, extemporizer on music. He knows hundreds of songs. He can read music. He can play you Bach preludes. His partner Muriel, who's a writer, also has a beautiful voice, which he very rarely lets be heard. And they are sitting at home in their isolation, which is in France where they live. And every day he's getting online and singing and playing, mostly playing. Steve playing the piano. Once or twice he'll play a song I wrote. And I mean, I can't tell you, it's very hard not to have tears come to your eyes when you hear Muriel's son, Antoine, who's this giant, handsome 7-foot guy who's a tremendous drummer and a credible singer, singing a song I wrote with Roseanne Cash and Chris Christopherson called April 5th, which, heaven knows, might be the earliest that we see genuine light in the distance, if not in the end of the tunnel. And I urge you to go to Steve Naive's Facebook and just put it on rather than listen to ever-mounting statistics, many of which are very grim. Listen to what he's doing. He's doing something very generous. I'm very proud to call him my friend and to call him my bandmate. Because if I had the ability to play the piano like that or play any instrument like that, I would be playing for you right now instead of talking. But as you know, I just play a few chords on the guitar and do something that's sort of like singing. I'm working away on words and songs and things that I'll hopefully bring to you later. But right now you can hear Steve Naive if you go to Facebook, and I really encourage you to do that. Molly McLean, now, she's asking specifically about a record that the Attractions and I made. Well, in fact, it was a collaboration with Clive Langer, which is a song called Shipbuilding. It's a song right now that is I suppose in some ways you could say it has some connection to the moment, because it's a song about the dilemma of a working man who's given his job in the shipyard back only to build a ship which might send his son away to die. That's the kind of conundrum we face now with people who absolutely don't have the savings to withstand this particular moment, and they need to be told their job is not going to disappear and they're not going to just be out of work forever, or the resources to support them are perhaps not forthcoming. Those that have got all the money, and I'm sure you all feel I have it, but those that really do have that incredible wealth are not going to give it up very readily to redistribute to the rest of us, rest of you, even if I assume that I can actually make it through this. That said, Shipbuilding is a song I've had to sing with some sentiment that keeps changing in relation to events. Clive and I wrote it during the Falklands conflict. We wrote it for Robert Wyatt, as I'm sure you know. Robert did really the definitive version. It was a collaboration between the three of us. Clive and Steve Naive played piano on Robert's version. And I actually produced Robert's vocal session, so it was really a co-production. A little while later, Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley produced the album Punch the Clock, on which we wanted to re-record Shipbuilding to bring it to even a wider audience and heard it mostly in the UK. There didn't seem to be any sense to Steve being the featured soloist on it, so we discussed various options for the solo voice. And with incredible luck, Chet Baker disagreed with Stan Getz, one of his long-term colleagues, on a tour in Germany, and he found himself in London doing a couple of very quickly organized shows in a club in Covent Garden. I read about this probably in the Melody Maker or something like that, and took myself down from Air Studios in Oxford Street where we were recording, and waited at the bar until the end of the first set. Chet came off the stand. He came up to get a drink, and I offered to buy it for him and asked him if he would play on our record. I mean, he was in no way suspicious of me. He had absolutely no idea who I was. I didn't expect he would know me from any of the records I'd put out. But I asked him what it would take, who would speak to get him to come and play trumpet with us. He said me, basically. He didn't have a manager as such. I asked him how much it would cost, and he said, how about scale, which is the union fee for a trumpet part. I said, how about double scale, because I figured I couldn't insult him with just paying him the basic rate. I thought of him as a great artist and had all his records and had learnt such a lot and had written the song Almost Blue with him in mind, although I had never even imagined I would even meet him, much less get to work with him. A couple of days later, he turned up, and to answer Molly's question, what was his demeanour? Yes, well, it's not exactly unknown that Chet had pretty serious problems with heroin, and I have no idea whether he was struggling with the absence of it or was indeed on the maintenance of it. He asked me one question about sources of such things, and I told him I didn't know anything about that, and he never questioned me again about it. As anybody who has a friend who has any kind of addiction issue, you know that even your closest friends who have problems with drugs can sometimes do very unexpected things and can be, really you're very surprised by the choices they make. I can't say anything about how he made it through his life. I had to get the opportunity to talk with him, and we became something like friends. Everything he played that day was amazing. It's one of the very best tracks by the Attractions. Everybody in the band played superbly well. Chet mostly listened. We had put the track down, and we had a foundation for him to play over. We did attempt to play live, but the structure of shipbuilding is very unusual, and frankly, Chet was more used to conventional Tim Pan Alley pop songs that are often used as the basis for jazz improvisation, or his own compositions, which had their own form. In the end, he played what you hear, this very plaintive, very beautiful, actually almost like a composition of its own. If you listen to the melody he's playing, this is not related at all to Clive Langer's tune of shipbuilding. It's an invention of Chet's own, which is equally powerful. And of course, it was right in tune in every sense with the sentiments of the song, of the melancholy, the conflict, and everything. It's one of the records of which I'm most proud. As he left the studio, I gave him, I think, a vinyl copy of Imperial Bedroom and said, this here song, Almost Blue, is, I wrote it with you in mind. I've no idea whether you'd be interested in it. And although I saw him a couple of times after that, and I went to see him play at Ronnie Scott's, and I even appeared with him at Ronnie Scott's one time, we never did really discuss the song. About 3 months after he died in a very unusual and tragic accident in Amsterdam, I heard that he'd actually recorded the song both for a film called Let's Get Lost, and also played it in his repertoire towards the end of his life when he was in Tokyo, and still playing beautifully well. If you get a chance to hear Chet Baker live in Tokyo, you'll hear really what the thrill it must have been was for me to hear him actually realize this song that I just dreamed he would play. I had no way of knowing that would ever happen. So moving on here now, Wayne Tideswell, if you could pick just one album that you're most proud of, which one would it be? Well, that's like asking, which of your children, your 30 children, do you like best? I mean, not to exaggerate it, the records are records. They're a collection of the way we felt about songs recorded in the period that was given with the resources we were given. I don't have one above all. Same as anybody, your favorite of anything tends to change from day to day. If you ask me what my favorite Beatles song was, it would be And Your Bird Can Sing one day, and it would be I'm Down another day, or it would be It Don't Bother Me, or even If I'm in the Right Mood, Act Naturally, and then all four of the guys are covered. I'm the same way. I mean, we did a tour called Just Trust recently. It wasn't in any way one of those shows where we played the album Trust from beginning to end. But we did revisit a couple of the songs, and we really enjoyed playing them, as we always do. I'm very fortunate to have lots of songs. The hardest thing is choosing which ones to play every night. The Just Trust idea was simply to say to the audience, you have to trust that we know what we're doing. And we try to pick a selection, some from Look Now, our last record, some that you would expect to hear if you buy a ticket for us, some that you maybe never thought you'd hear us play, and make them and improvise on the idea of that. That's what we've really found works for us as a band. This is the Imposters. This is not something happening 40 years ago with the Attractions. That was a great band, but it doesn't exist anymore. These guys are the guys I play with now, because Pete Thomas and Steve Naive were members of that original band. But they have 40 years of accumulated experience. And if you do take a look at Steve Naive's Facebook page and watch him play, you'll hear all the ideas of music that he has. And I'm sure he didn't have all of these when I first met him when he was 17. I mean, I didn't tell you that I have any of these ideas. One of the great things about getting to do something which is a vocation in your life as your occupation is that you have the privilege of being paid to explore things that you're curious about and try to make sense. Now, you may not always like what comes out of that. You may have an idea of what you'd like me to sing, and you might think I could, you know better than me what I should sing. But I have to tell you that I know better what I should sing. And if I make a mistake in front of you, I apologize and move on and try to do it better next time, or try to see the value in it. And sometimes a song I've written or even a record we've made will be bewildering to people. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, even now 20 years later, it'll occur to people what we were doing. The most important thing is to do everything you do in music and in art, but in every walk of life with the integrity. And everybody has a bad day at the office. Everybody has a cold sometimes. Thankfully, I don't have the virus to put me in danger. I hope that your health remains in the way that allows you to care for your family, for your loved ones, the vulnerable people around you, and all of that. I mean, I'm going to introduce this before I press on with the next question. But, the reason that I'm talking to you now is because we're part of this initiative of Artists4NHS, which, you can go to social media and you can, if possible, if you feel you can part with the money right now in this time of uncertainty, donate a little money. There's a way to do it. I mean, there are nurses, there are particularly volunteers who are working at their full capacity to keep people safe, to try and combat this. And sadly, they're not always given all of the reward they should be. There are simple things that they need. If you're reading in the newspaper that imaginary television programs are donating their gowns and masks, and even, I've heard about real equipment that is used in American television shows being donated, you realize that this is very serious. And the questions we might ask about what's fair and what isn't fair and how we want to change it, that debate is not really for right now, because you have to deal with the problem first before we can have it. So if you can do anything, that's what I would hope, and that's what I'm going to do. Let's press on here now. I'm being asked something which really does relate to the circumstances we're living in here, even though it's only my particular thing. Liz McCaskill writes to ask if there are any news or updates on Facing the Crowd. Well, of course, Facing the Crowd is a musical show that I've been helping to write. I wrote the score in collaboration with Sarah Rule, who's writing what you call the book, which is the story. We have a wonderful director, Rebecca Teichman, who's, doing plays that you've seen. And we have producers and a theatre that were all ready to go. We were in the process of getting ready to do a big workshop where you get to test the show in something like theatrical circumstances. When you write these shows, you tend to go through a process of just being in a rehearsal room with music stands and somebody playing the piano, singers come in, actors, they read the lines and sing the songs, but you don't get to move around. You're actually forbidden to do that by equity, because obviously actors would be worked into the ground if equity didn't protect them from ruthless directors who would just have them stay at the task until they'd heard the play as they imagined it. So all of these things are strictly controlled, and the same thing applies as does to our shows. The people who we had hoped to engage to act this play out and take it to the next stage cannot be in each other's company for the time being. They have to keep the social distancing. There isn't any way you can get on a video conference and hope to act a play out or sing it or any of that. So for the time being, as you probably read, It took a little while to close the theatres in London down and in other parts of the UK, but Broadway, along with the NBA and Disneyland and all these other things where we might congregate, did close down quite quickly in the United States. So that is really the story. For the time being, we just have to be patient. It gives us a chance to look at the material. It gives us a chance to talk to actors who might conceivably be available to us, as everybody's schedule in every line of work all over the world is now in flux. I'm really, proud of these songs. Anybody who's been to my shows in the last few years has probably heard me sing one or two of them. I've enjoyed singing them, but obviously they were written for characters to sing, and the story is one which will always be timely. People have said it's like the present moment in American politics, but the man who wrote the story originally, A Face in the Crowd, is a man called Bud Schulberg. He wrote this story as a little short, in a short story collection in about 1953. By the time Elia Kazan made a movie of it in 1957, it was after the McCarthy hearings, and people had seen how powerful television could be in building up and breaking down demagogues. Now, Bud Schulberg could not imagine Richard Nixon. He could not imagine Ronald Reagan, who was said to be a great communicator on television. He could certainly never imagine a essentially television star becoming a president, although some things in the story seem to predict it. So to say that it exactly explains or critiques the present presidency of the United States is not what I'm trying to say in my songs. I'm trying to say that within the heart of the crowd are dark impulses that sometimes people in power recognize, and they certainly manipulate them. Television is one of the key ways we manage to have that system of control. That's really what the story is about. So eventually it will come to your town, hopefully. We will get it done. We can only do it when everybody can gather creatively, safely, and we can't put tickets on sale for anything if we're asking you to come to a theatre where you feel insecure. So that's the answer. Thank you, Liz, for that, because it's good to clarify. Now, Francesca Jones, she's asked, how did your collaboration with Paul McCartney come about? Well, what can you say? It's not something you really expect to happen to you. When I think back to myself in short trousers being a member of the Beatles fan club. But you know what? It wasn't that 9-year-old boy who was asked to collaborate with Paul McCartney. I was, I don't know, about 33 or something like that when I got that call. The fellow who was sort of managing him at the time made the suggestion to the fellow who was managing me at the time that there might be something to us getting together in a room and writing a song. Paul could not have been more open to any idea. I turned up the first day with my guitar and a blank sheet of paper. By the end of the day, he had helped me finish the song Veronica, which I had just begun writing. I knew it was a serious song in theme because it was written about my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. And I wanted to write a hopeful song about the moments of illumination and grace that happen within that dreadful condition in the early stages. Now, Paul recognized that, but he also recognized if you're going to make a pop tune out of it, you've got to use your skills to open up the music of it. We went on and we wrote So Like Candy and My Brave Face and a couple of others. We wrote a very emotional song for me called That Day Is Done, and 15 songs in the end. So, I mean, there are now 30 years past, and I cannot tell you how thrilling it was to sit opposite him, having only imagined how that process was. Now, he paid me the compliment of saying that it was a challenging, in a good way, challenging kind of collaboration, but there's absolutely no way that I could be like John Lennon. He isn't the Paul McCartney that he was when he wrote Yesterday or The Magical Mystery Tour or something. He's the man he is today in the life he was living, or was then, 30 years ago. Here he is now, still playing these fantastic concerts, and if you ever get a chance, go see him. I was at Liverpool at the Echo, or whatever it's called these days, the Marks and Spencer's Biscuit Tin Arena, and his show was just sensational. So, I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity, and Francesca, thank you for letting me say that, just that I say it with a lot of love, because that's the way I feel. You asked me about an even rarer song as well, which is a song called Just a Memory, and this is one of those things for any songwriter watching. It really is something I want to say, that I think I've held the theory for a long time that originality in popular music is actually sometimes achieved by imagining another voice than your own in your head, even somebody who has much more talent than you as a singer or as a writer, and to kind of head towards that light as if it's going to guide you. And even if your ambition and your invention is dashed on the rocks of your own mediocrity, you might simply get something that is unique. Now, Dusty Springfield is probably in my top 5 of favorite singers. I mean, you make these lists up, it's like saying, what's your favorite album? Dusty Springfield, without question, is one of the greatest singers who ever stood in front of a microphone anywhere. Being my Anglo-Irish background, I take full credit for the fact that, like all of the Beatles, she has Irish heritage. But I mean, it is actually true that she was one of the most beautiful, soulful singers, and apparently deeply insecure about this magical voice she had. Now, I wrote a song imagining her singing it. I was in the studio where I produced the Specials' first album, TW Studios, located on the Fulham Palace Road beneath a laundromat, or laundrette as we called it in England. And I recorded one evening with Steve Naive about a 1.5-minute demo of this song called Just a Memory. I think it came out on an EP. Never ever thought about it again. Then while we were making the album Imperial Bedroom, about 4 years later, I got a call from Los Angeles saying, Dusty Springfield wants to speak to you. Can you imagine? It was like something in a dream. Dusty was on the other end of the line. She was really, really lovely, very self-effacing, very funny and kind of wicked. She said, it's a bit short, this song. Can you write us another verse? But she said to me, nothing too lovey-dovey. So, okay, I'll write that. And I wrote a second verse and sent a demo of it to her. The next thing, there was a recording of it. Now, truth be told, it's not the best record she ever made. The production wasn't great, but it was still Dusty Springfield singing your song. You know, thankfully, the Pet Shop Boys did, around that time, put her in a context of that where younger people could appreciate her. Now, that's 30 years ago now. Now you don't even need that to happen. You can go to iTunes or Spotify or any of those kind of systems if you don't already have a record, as you might not be browsing the record racks for a while. And just listen to I Close My Eyes, I Count to 10, or, you know, My Colouring Book, or half a dozen other songs. You know, I Don't Want to Hear It Anymore, Breakfast in Bed, No Easy Way Down. The list goes on and on of songs which, if you don't already have them in your life would be better if you had them. So we're getting near the end here, but Mark Sebastian Darcy, very spectacular name there, he said, I've been listening to Linda Ronstadt's album where she covers your material. What do you think of her treatment? Well, this is something that I've written about recently, because there is a beautiful film about Linda Ronstadt's career, which you can see now. I think you can probably see it on the streaming services if you have access to that. I went to see it in the cinema on a double bill with the new Miles Davis documentary. And the big surprise to me was that the Miles documentary, of course, contained incredible music, but it didn't tell me too many things I didn't already know about him. In truth, it's a good film and you should see it, but I'd read a lot of books about Miles. I'd listened to his music for all my life. Linda, on the other hand, is somebody that I admired at a distance, but I was never really a huge fan. Now, in 1978, it turns out that the Attractions and I played the Hollywood High School, which was a bit of a stunt, really. We were playing this high school as if we were some teenage sensation. I now know that there were a whole bunch of people that were there who were in show business. It was, after all, Hollywood High School. The movie director Ron Howard. You know, it turns out Linda Ronstadt and a bunch of other songwriters and singers and producers and musicians came to check out these upstarts from England. Sometime later, Linda recorded my song Alison. And, you know, I have to be honest, when I heard her version, I thought she sang it well, but I really hated the arrangement. It was like not my kind of thing. And, you know, the thing I'm sad about now is I said that out loud, and I hadn't yet learned the grace of saying, yeah, this is something different. It isn't the way I hear it, but she's done this with some integrity. Even the musicians whose styles I don't like, they're not deliberately playing this to insult my composition. Now, I was a little bit too full of myself, to say the least, in those days, over matters like that. Linda not sort of taken aback by my less than sort of enthusiastic response, went on to record three, count them, three songs of mine on her next record, Mad Love, which I think is about 40 years old now. She recorded Party Girl, which was a great choice to hear a woman sing that song. Girls Talk, well, that makes sense. And Talking in the Dark, which was, after all, not really an album track that it would have been, that you had to dig for a little bit. It was on an EP. So I really thought that proved that she really had listened. And I think that Peter Asher, who produced her record, of course, was half of Peter and Gordon, and Nemzak, who, had a connection to the Beatles, to say the least, produced those records. And now he and I have had words about this in a good way, because Peter's produced a thing that I did for a movie, and we've had time to talk about this. Sadly, I've never met Linda, but I did apologize to her from the stage of the Hollywood Bowl when I played. My goodness, they're getting in. And we're back. Well, that was obviously the television, which just sprang to life of its own. I mean, you don't even want to make jokes about things being having viruses these days, but who knows how that happened anyway. I'm sorry to interrupt what I was saying. In answer to the question about Linda Ronstadt, we'll wrap it up in a minute and you can get back and you can watch this anytime. It's here. Linda, is sadly has Parkinson's disease, which is still her voice. She's not able to sing. If you do get a chance to see the film about her life, you'll see that she still manages to sing very beautifully in the company of a couple of her cousins in the final frames. For me, there's somebody who's, Anne Ronan, my brother, and my other brothers, Liam and Kieran and Rory, all of whom are right now taking care of their circumstances independently, like so many of us. We are all grateful for the care that the NHS gave to our father, Ross McManus, is the fella that really showed me the example of how to sing. Our grandfather was the trumpet player who picked up music as a family business, but it's my dad really that got us thinking this way, I'm sure. Now, the last few months of his life were not very easy. So the care that he was given by the doctors and nurses in a less panicked situation that we're in right now is something I'll never ever forget. Anybody really who's lived a little bit of time, and I'm 65, means that, I was sick as a kid and I was in hospital for quite a bit of time with pneumonia. So, I know what it's like to be with a respiratory distress and the panic that not just you as a patient, because when you're a kid, you don't know what's happening, but my parents must have felt about that. So you appreciate the feelings that people have. Now, when you think about somebody whether you've been a massive fan of them and you read that they're sick, or any public figure, you have to think about all the people who don't get reported because they're not in a job that gets necessarily into the headlines. Linda Ronstadt's a person who I've come to have enormous respect for her single-mindedness and determination and individuality, taking on music that she loved. And when I look at my own career, I think, well, I've only done the same thing in my own way. And I don't mind if you sing the same song forever, for the same one. If your disposition is to do that, and that's what you should do, then do it. It hasn't been my way, and it hasn't been her way. So, of course, if you ask me what I think about her now, it's filled with complex thoughts of the challenge that she has faced very bravely, along with so many people, to deal with something that stops you from being able to do the very thing you were built to do. Now, the final point, really to say thank you for listening to me. I've rambled on long enough. I wish you all everything that you could wish for everybody you love. Try not to be too angry with the people that are making mistakes. You have to be responsible in the short term to listen to the advice. If it's not right that we stay apart and isolate, then what's the harm that we try it for a while unless we go mad? So don't go mad. It's as simple as that. Just be joyful. And like I say, I've written only songs in major keys since before this started. And it's unusual for me. And I mean that really. When I bring them to you, you'll hear what they are. I don't know whether they're the best songs I've ever written, but they're the songs I'm writing. And I'm lucky to do what I do. So if you can, even if it's just show support, if you have anything that you want to contribute, any other thing you can do, or even if you just do something like I think everybody's doing, like check in with somebody who you know lives by who's a bit more vulnerable. That kind of stuff. You know, you don't need me to say it. You know, somebody has been kind enough to leave a bag of groceries outside the door every 4 days, so I'm just not eating spaghetti hoops. Now, I'd only say thank you for that, because that means I don't have to break my isolation while I'm doing the sensible thing. And they have to go out and get some groceries eventually for themselves. If they get me a few and leave them in a bag, then that's one less person wandering around breathing on people. Anyway, lots of love to you all, and we will see you, or I will see you, in a little while. The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the birds and bees. We need money, that's what we want. That's what we want. That's what we want. Money don't get everything, it's true. What it don't get, we can use. We need money. That's what we want. Loving money. That's what we want. A lot of money. Please give them money.